everybody. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of FinOps Fridays. My name is Hunter Willis. I'm your host today. We have Phillip Purcell and Ben de Mora. Both of them have been doing FinOps since before FinOps was FinOps. They've both been involved with the FinOps Foundation since just about right around the time of its inception, and even in some cases part of its inception. And really glad to have them here today. We're going to be talking about transparency, accountability, and efficiency when it comes to FinOps, and we want to pick their brains through all their experience, everything they've seen, both from working at several different organizations over the years, as well as from the perspective of helping out different organizations implement FinOps themselves. So, Phil, Ben, why don't we start with Phil? Just introduce yourself, and then Ben, and then we'll dive into the conversation here.
Phillip Purcell, currently a senior FinOps consultant over at IBM now. And with that, prior to my IBM days, yeah, like you said, I helped spike up the FinOps group over there at Koch Industries long before FinOps actually had a title to it.
Yeah, Ben de Mora. I'm now running the FinOps Strategic Advisory. I can never say that word, Strategic Advisory, over at IBM Consulting now for the last couple of months. Before that, I was at Aptio and IBM with Phil working as a senior consultant. And I've also been involved in building FinOps practices at places like Sky and also looking at consulting services and figuring out how we help people to do better in cloud.
I just like to tease Ben a little bit about the fact that he came to Aptio and he claimed one of his reasons that he wanted to work on that team was to work with me. Then he goes to IBMC. He leaves me.
So it goes. So it goes.
So it
Well,
goes.
and so and almost every single conversation that I have, especially with people on the finance side of the house, transparency, accountability, efficiency, but also even from like the FinOps practitioners themselves and engineering will also touch on this when I speak with them about how important it is to have open channels of communication. And also, with these aspects of FinOps and open communication and getting everybody to see the numbers, this aspect of there being an agenda or an axe to grind or trying to lean in on people starts to melt away because everybody starts to realize that they all need to get on the same page. So guys, talk to us a little about, Ben, can we just start with you? Talk to us a little bit about, from a high level, your kind of the way that you see these things, and your experience in dealing with different organizations, how important they are, and strategies that people take to kind of implement, overcome, and the benefits of them, right?
Yeah, so it's a great question. It's a good starting point. So, I mean, we have to balance the work of doing cloud cost efficiency against all the other drivers from business. We have to think about things like time to market, think about things like new product release, all this other stuff. And really, although we would love for there to be the efficiency being the number one top work driver and the priority at the top, that's not always the case, right? So when it comes to understanding what needs to be done, we need full transparency. And what do we mean by that is understanding not just, okay, I found some money that we could potentially reduce on our spend as a result of changing our usage patterns, but what is the cost of achieving that? And who gets to sign off on that? And what is the opportunity cost of doing that work instead of something else that we would be doing to drive revenue or to drive towards market, right? So it's a balancing act, and that balancing act itself needs to be made with understanding, with that insight piece in place. So yeah, that's one of the main sort of strategic considerations is how do we balance the efficiency improvements? And that, by the way, isn't just in terms of like cleaning up the cloud situation, the housekeeping and getting rid of the right sizing, but also optimizing the way that we go to cloud, right? Optimizing our workflows, our cloud landing zones, our standard processes and governance and controls. All this stuff also needs to be tidied up in the light of what we learn from our footprint in cloud, right? So there's a lot of optimization and efficiency work to be done, but there's also, frankly, let's go earn some money and go to market and get our product out the door and make it better than the competitors, all that kind of stuff. So these two things both need doing, and balancing that out needs data to make the right decision.
So with that, so like Ben, what you're talking about is, to kind of summarize, is getting beyond just like focusing on the technical like task of optimizing things and understanding the efficiency of the productization and like kind of the overarching goals for what everybody's working towards, right? And in order to do that, there has to be accountability into the financial side of the house, which is something that we hear, right? Engineers need to understand why the incentive exists for them to do this thing. And so, Phil, I'm going to pop it over to you. Have you seen like uh kind of strategies that organizations have taken from the get-go to operationalize that transparency and communication?
Yeah, absolutely. There's several different things we talk about in that realm. One of them that, I'll steal this phrase absolutely is putting data in the path. That's one of the big things for me. Whether it's talking about finance, vendors, engineering, whatever direction we're going, the more that you can put the task in front of the person who needs to do the task when they're ready to do the task, that's the most opportune time. So, for example, one of the go-tos for me is when I talk about we talk a lot about optimizations, right sizing tasks, things like this. So if I'm talking about that specifically, that does go into the engineer realm. How do I best get that in front of an engineer? I put it into their task backlog, whether they're using Azure DevOps, Monday, whatever the tool happens to be. We can create a backlog task, get it back there. That also goes into a culture of accountability, which I'll get into in a second. But that then sets it up so that we've got the right value associated with it. What is the value to the business of taking this action? But then secondarily, we've also got the sense of prioritization in there as well. Oftentimes, businesses will set that based on a threshold of how much that value is. How impactful will this change be? Are there other things that will take priority? Then from that, we can, as we come around in the sprint to choose what tasks are going to move forward, we can look at that and say, oh, it's a low priority, decently high value. Maybe that doesn't make it into this sprint ahead of other tasks we need for development, but next sprint, that's going to be closer to the top of the list that'll come in. So that creates a lot of that, but also that sense of accountability. If that thing just sits and it molds in the backlog, then now we have a task we can go back, see when it was entered, see the communication chain, and understand we put this in front of them. It's not been happening. Why isn't it happening? Let's have a conversation first. And if this persists, we have all of the documentation, the logs to show that there should have been some kind of action taken, and we can hold those people accountable. Same thing, and again, I don't mean to beat up on engineers because I know oftentimes we say getting engineers to take action, engineers, and we just beat up so much on them. But realistically, this is across all practices, finance, vendor relationships, even into sponsorship sometimes. The better we have those logs, the emails, the Slack messages, whatever it is, the more we can introduce that accountability and really make sure things are happening.
Well, in this last episode, I talked with Mike Mack from KubeCost, and one of the things that he pointed out is that he was coming as a financial director, so he's kind of the FinOps guy from the cloud perspective, and he mentioned that finance people need to take accountability for understanding what the engineers are doing, because if you don't understand the reason that something is happening, then you can't understand the financial significance of investing in it. And he said, he spoke at length at the fact that finance people, the more they understand about what's going on from the engineering side, not just at the product level, but also at the resources supporting them and why they need those resources for things like scalability, right? Like being able to have, GPUs for AI workloads and things like that, especially that are coming on now, how much that helps inform the finance side of the house. Ben, can you talk to us about the importance of, the finance side, basically the other way, right? So not just
Yeah.
finance being able to talk numbers to engineers, but vice versa, right?
Yeah, so I think regardless of which direction the conversation is going, I mean, to sort of paraphrase a famous quote, context is for kings, context is king. Context is absolutely critical. I think in a world where we have not got the luxury of 6 to 8 months of deployment delay for kit to hit the floor, where the business sort of, frankly, the dysfunctional and slow interconnectivity of a business can be concealed to some effect by the fact that you have to wait half a year for your kit to arrive. We now have like your environment is spun up in the time it takes to drink a cup of coffee. So now all of those inefficiencies, all of those sort of misconnections are exposed, right? Warren Buffett said that it's only when the tide goes out you see who's been swimming naked, right? And it's that's kind of the thing. We're seeing the tide going out. We're seeing the organizational connectivity that isn't happening, and the context, that shared understanding, doesn't mean that everybody in finance now has to go and do AWS solutions architect, right? They don't need to do that. It might be good if they could do the cloud practitioner, so they understood that's like a 4-hour piece of effort, right? It might be good if they could go do that, so that when somebody says EC2, they know what that means, right? Or RDS and savings plans for RDS, which of course will happen one day, Phil. I promise. I'm sure they will.
I'll be waiting.
Maybe reinvent. Maybe we've just seen the news. But
All those
like, I don't know.
amazing releases that just happened too, Ben.
All
Oh
of
my
those
God.
things that
I
we've
was
definitely
blown away.
just seen. That's right, me too. RDS savings plans, who knew? But yeah, so like all these things, okay, they don't need to know how to code them. They don't need to know how they work. They just need to know conceptually, what is this thing that I'm seeing? How is money spent on it? Is it something that we did as a process job and it's finished? Or am I going to see this every weekend or every other day or whatever? What's the pattern like for that? And what should I expect? What does good look like in that as well would be useful, right? So
What are
from the finance
containers and why are
perspective,
all the engineers so concerned with how their lunch is packed?
exactly, that's right. Yeah.
On the
Why
back
is
of
everything so much Tupperware, so much.
Yeah.
But like, but I think it's really important just to have a concept at least. And same thing the other way, right? Like we don't need to know how to do each other's jobs because we need to be specialists in our field, but we need to be able to share enough context to have a common conversation. And that comes back to the ownership piece, right? When we own something, if we're driving ownership and accountability, which are one and the same thing, really, we need to have insight and agency to make the right decisions from our sphere of influence on that. And we can't do that unless we have a shared context picture, which is useful and accurate and helps us to move forward and work with each
And you
other.
know what occurs to me, Ben, is that in just those couple of back and forths we just had, we basically just summarized everything from the 6 principles behind FinOps, the 22
Pretty much.
capabilities across 4 domains, right? All
Yeah.
the FinOps framework really boiled down into those 3 words, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the capabilities within the manage the FinOps practice domain is the FinOps assessment itself. So, being able to execute a realistic and importantly targeted insight and understanding of a capability or a set of capabilities in an empirical and sort of dispassionate objective way, and know then whether or not, first of all, is it where it should be, because like we've talked about the level set that we need to have. Is it where it should be? If not, why not? What's missing? Have we had a people leave, brain drain? Have we got new technical debt due to an M&A purchase of a company, and suddenly we've got a bunch of cloud resources to work up all this sort of thing. So what is the critical change point that's required in that capability or that domain or whatever? That is a capability in and of itself, is to do the analysis, right? And that ought to be done. I think ultimately what I've seen being most successful, there was an Italian business that I spoke to as a client last year. And the woman who was leading their FinOps practice, who was an absolute rock star, she took the assessment and said, no, I don't want you to do the assessment for me. Teach me. And I taught them, and they built their own version of it, and they've now rolled that out. All of the teams are doing their own analyses of the capabilities that relate to that team. So maybe not all 22, because some of them are not relevant for those teams. They're aware of their current state and what they need to do to grow that further forward, right? And going on beyond that, there's another sort of piece that's maybe a bit of an extension to this, which is not just how good are these individual capabilities, but how well do they fit together, right?
Mhm.
If we're looking at a bunch of capabilities, we've got a bag of Lego, right? We've got a bunch of pieces that are, in and of themselves, are a lump of highly dangerous things to step on if you're a parent. Trust me, it really hurts. It really hurts. But like, yeah, there's a bunch of capabilities kind of in separate pieces, right? They're all great, they're all perfect, they all look great. But how do you plug these together? How do we create the structure that the business needs? Going back to Phil's much earlier comment about workflows, how do we plug those into existing workflows? That, I think, is where it suddenly becomes a lot more relevant and a lot more mature. Because if we can find areas of existing workflows that do almost all of that capability and they've been doing it for years, we can leverage that. It's not something that we're building from a blank sheet of paper. So boosting the maturity of a practice, really the best benefit you can get is to go to the business and find out what you already have, that you can plug into these practice pieces and augment from them and with them. So that's kind of the way that I kind of look at it, is like, what have I got to start with? Can I boost this?
Yep. And I want to hook into one of the things you mentioned about working with your Italian client, Ben. So first of all, before I even do that, I just want to give a little bit of gravity into Ben's accolades, because he is such a humble person that he probably wouldn't mention this himself. But Ben is literally one of the guys who wrote the book on the maturity assessment. So, absolute sense of gravitas from that. But one of the things Ben helped me to connect to as well, one of the things I took away from that was that the maturity assessment is not meant to be done across the groups like as this entire one behemoth monolithic task, right? Instead, if you actually read through the assessment guide that he wrote, it resources down into target group and target scope. And with that, you can take away exactly what he was talking about with his Italian client. She was looking at an individual group, we'll say the engineering team, just because I picked on them earlier, so this is a little bit lighter topic. So it's looking at a target group, and for this one team, this one engineering team, now let's look at which capabilities we're going to talk to them about. What is important? What is the topic at hand? Let's do those 2, maybe 3 capabilities. Okay, we can get that assessed. Now let's put that off somewhere. Let's put that into a data set, like whether that's going into SQL database, or, it doesn't even have to be that serious, but just store it somewhere that it is now aggregable data that we can build in with all of our other teams, and we can start assessing it with all of the other capabilities. And now you have that monolithic, for our organization, this is the score we've come across for our overall FinOps maturity. But again, to the point, it's not one score. The business is not just in a walk phase, in a run phase. It is for individual capabilities such as workload optimization. Maybe we're doing really well there. We put a lot of focus, so we're in a run state on that. But for another one, such as policy and governance, maybe for that, we're still in a walk or even a crawl stage. So as an organization, it's difficult to say, yeah, we're holistically at a run state. I think it's more fair to say, well, which capability do you want to talk about?
I was going to use a relevant analogy, right? Let's say it's swap capability or maturity for spend, right? I've got 3,000 cloud engineers working for me, and my cloud spend is $105 million a year. And my waste is 25-30%. Okay, great. Who do I talk to? I've got thousands of engineers, tens of teams, hundreds of teams. Who do I talk to? That doesn't help me, right? So, so to have we are at walk, our maturity score is 2.3 out of 4. Okay, great. Where are you struggling?
Don't be the generic flying superhero, be the mild-mannered news reporter, right? And the reason I say that is you can try to take all the tasks on your back and try to resolve everything in the world. But if you are the communicator, if you know the right people to talk to and you leverage the right people at the right time, what's going to happen is now you're going to be able to scale out, you're going to be able to get everything resolved because you're not feeling overwhelmed, they're not feeling overwhelmed. Everybody understands what's in front of them, and yeah, communication is key.
Great, well-rounded conversation, guys. I really appreciate everything that you've touched on today. I think we got in the thick of it and really got out some meat and potatoes. So really, really appreciate it. Phil, Ben, once again, thanks for your time too. Phil, Ben, for both of you, any last words?
Great quote here. If I've seen further than others, it's only by standing on the shoulders of giants. Very, very prescient thing that I keep with me in my FinOps life.
Yeah, that's a good quote. I don't have any good quotes. This was great fun. I think it's really important that we never forget the human element of this, right? Remember that this is a change journey, but it's not a technology. Yes, it's a technology change journey. It's a business change journey, but it's a personal change journey. People's own jobs, their ability to get a good day's work done is changing when this is being brought in place. And that change needs to be supported and understood and be compassionate towards. So let's remember that this is a human change journey that we're doing.
All right, great. Thanks again, guys. Really appreciate it. Everybody, thanks for tuning in to this episode of FinOps Fridays. We'll see you next time.